Alright, so we've made a couple of changes here. Switch back to the LS throttle body, and I realized that this was very early on when I did the conversion before. If you watch the live stream many years back, this was the original intake that I put on it. I immediately was battling issues with trying to get it to go into gear without stalling. Anyways, that had a lot to do with the tune. It had some to do with the C4. There was issues with that. Now that there's a T5 in here, idle is not nearly the issue that it was. It's also tuned differently. It uses spark to control the idle, the return to idle. Now that's how it was tuned. So I decided it fits better. The throttle cable geometry was terrible before, coming into the 1000 CFM throttle body that I had on here. 1000 CFM throttle body was too large. The 75 millimeter, which is what this is much more appropriately sized. The early theories were that this extra plenum volume was an issue. It will change the tune a little bit, but I'm probably just going to open up the long-term compensation limits a little bit, and then it'll adjust itself enough. I'm probably not going to need to retune it. I may take it back to West Tech and run it on the dyno again, because I want to see what it'll do with the T5 and the 9-inch in it and everything. So maybe we'll adjust the tune on the dyno again, but it's going to be close enough. Switch the LS3 map sensor. I'm failing my words as usual. You can see the part number on it right there. This is a 1-bar map sensor. So that's an easy switch in the software. You just change it to this part number here, the LS3 style, I think 2005 and up, and it will automatically rescale the voltage scale for that. So I got rid of the older throttle body style map that was in here. It also uses the LS, because it's an LS throttle body, obviously, uses the LS style IAC, or a Chevrolet IAC rather. Actually, this is not an LS throttle body. This is like off an Astro van or something like that. Maybe a V6, because it's only 75 millimeters, not 92, which obviously is perfect for this. It's even then still too large, but much better than 1000 CFM that I had. There's two wires that have to get switched, because the Chrysler style that Holley uses, Holley seems to exclusively use the Chrysler style IACs. There's a wiring difference, the high and the low control. If you look at the schematic, it'll show you. You have to be careful. That actually tripped me up early on with this setup. I couldn't get the IAC to work, and I realized I had wired it for Chrysler wiring on a LS style. So I've switched it back and forth a few times. Anyways, I put some bullet connectors down in here so I can switch it back and forth if I want. That way I don't have to depin this all the time. But you have to switch A and C on the IAC plug. Switching terminals A and C back and forth will get you either Chrysler or GM style IAC. Other than that, it fired right up. It runs great. I didn't really have any issues switching back to it. I haven't driven it yet, but I suspect it's going to be all right. The tune's probably going to be off a little bit, but not enough to really matter, and it should adjust its way out of it. But mainly the fit is better. Also, the fixed orifice PCV, it has a nice fitting right here that I already had on this when I ran this setup in the beginning. It's a -6AN setup right here. This is a terrible place for the intake air temperature IAT sensor. It's not a very accurate place, but I don't really care. The IAT is not all that important. I'm not too concerned. It is going to run hotter. I can't seem to make the geometry work here. I'm going to cap this off where you'll remember from earlier videos where I had put the cool air intake in here. I'm just going to cap it for now. It's definitely not as good, but this fits in here, and it actually kind of looks pretty cool. So I did all this stuff, the cool air intake. I did all these things to try and make it idle better. And as it turns out, I took the C4 out of it. Must have had something wrong with it, because it idles fine like this. It's always idled better since I put the T5 in it. So I was battling a probably an unstable transmission pressure issue that was causing the engine to load down and making it not idle correctly. So anyways, those problems are all resolved. We're back to the LS style. It fits under the hood a little bit better, gives us a little bit more clearance in the shock tower back there, and it utilizes the space that's further forward here. A little bit better geometry for the cable, a little bit more cable sweep to it. It's also got a lighter spring. It's got redundant springs built into it right here. This is why I like using these. And this is a GM, this is a true Delco new original stock throttle body. So good quality, dual spring. So you don't have to worry about it if a spring breaks. It's got safety built into it. The pedal is lighter, I've noticed. So that's all good there. This thing's, is really ready to rock. This is something I've been wanting to do for a while, but I've been dealing with the trans and then the drive line and getting the rear end set up. So now that that's all done, I was able to spend a little bit of time on getting this kind of optimized over here. I think we should also do a summary so that we can go over what this car was and what it is now, and I'll try and not ramble too much. It was originally a 6-cylinder car. The car was all original other than the engine had been rebuilt probably twice. I know for sure it was rebuilt right when I first bought it. Original intention was not to touch anything, but original head had just been milled too many times and it wouldn't hold true. We learned that in many videos that if you go back and watch, where, I had the head on and off of it a bunch. Original power steering car, original pony interior car. That was covered in some videos. We redid the interior. Originally a C4 car as well, console, because it was a Sprint. So I did do a 2V conversion when I needed to change the head. It was just if I was going to put a head on it, I might as well do a 2V conversion. That definitely woke it up some. I went from a stock engine, which, by the way, I had put a single barrel sniper on it to replace the auto light that was worn out. So we did go EFI. There's been many versions of this, but we'll go over what's in here now. And it is still a 200, and it is still the original block to the car. I traced back the owner. I know for sure that the engine that was in it was original. It's a March date code casting on the block. It's an April build for the car, which is exactly what you would expect. And when I did the 2V, I did a long block exchange with the builder, and he still had my original block sitting around. So when I decided to go with the VI head, when I picked that up, that was just luck. We said, hey, let's put the original block back in the car because that'd be pretty cool. So it's still a 200. It is 40 over. It was 30 over when I bought it. It is now 40 over. Other than that, it's stock internals. It's got flat top pistons in it, but it's got it's a 1010 crank. I believe it's 1010. Original rods, flat top Silverlight cast pistons. I didn't do forged because I'm not boosting it. But the VI head is really where the magic is. It's got a Clay Smith 264 on 110 in it. Let's show the cam card real quick so that people ask what this build is. Cam is the brain of an engine. That's the most important part. Here's the cam card. So it's a 264, so it's single pattern. So it's 214 at 50, which if you were talking about a 350, that's a tiny cam. For a 200, it's on the bigger side. It's lifting 480. Now, there's a little bit of magic we got going on. Oh, it is a hydraulic flat tappet, by the way, just to clarify. Still, I didn't go solid. I probably should have gone solid, but it's a driver, so. A little bit of magic going on here. You'll notice that that's a 480 at 1.6. So we are actually at 1.7. So we used FE rockers, which gives us a little bit of cheating. It gives us a little bit more lift. So it's actually lifting 510 with 1.7s, if I'm doing my math correctly there. So that's, for a 200, that's quite a bit of cam. It's definitely, you can hear it. It's got some chop to it. So, and it's on a 110 center line, so that still gives you a little bit more of a broad torque curve. not as broad as a 112, but with the VI head being as big a plenum as it is, it's going to make all of its power up higher anyways. Okay, so front to back, we get the Champion 2-core radiator. It's just a stock replacement 2-core radiator. Lots of videos on talking about radiators, so I won't get into that and how aluminum and core thickness and tube size, all that. Spall electric fan. This is a 1516 with an HF125 auto cool controller. This is a high frequency controller. Got videos on all that. That keeps this thing ridiculously cool, especially now that it doesn't have the automatic trans in it. Like I said, original power steering car. This is a new Lars pump, but it's all factory brackets, factory balancer, although new replacement balancer with the original pulleys, all that. It's a one-wire Summit, 100 amp alternator, one-wire, true one-wire, and I'm running a little bit smaller pulley on it, mainly for availability of belts. So, this thing doesn't spin over $6,000, so I'm not worried about over revving the alternator, because you watch out, alternators have a max RPM. Talked about the bottom end already. That's all stock. It's got a milling oil pump in it. Standard volume, standard pressure. Vintage Inlines head. This is where some of the magic and customization is, other than the cam we just talked about. This is an Argentinian valve cover. I get a lot of questions about that. There are folks that can get those for you. If you jump on the Vintage Mustang 6 forum on Facebook, it's a group. It's a Facebook group. I'm one of the admins on there along with some other folks, so if you need the info, just let me know. Anyways, there are some folks that are down in Argentina that can get these for us. Be prepared to pay for them, though, and ridiculous amount, but it's got to be imported in their shipping cost, and they do them in bulk, so sometimes there's orders that happen with that. So Vintage Inlines head is fully ported and polished. It's been milled, and the bowls have been cleaned up to get us to about 10.5, almost 10.6 to 1, I think, is where this motor is at, which is the most that you really want to run on pump gas. But it is an aluminum head, which has benefits to it. I mentioned the rockers. Those are FE rockers that have been bushed down to fit the standard 6-cylinder rocker shaft, so it's got a new rocker shaft in it with custom FE rockers in it to get us to a 1:7 ratio. They're not rollers, they're just standard FE rockers. If I really wanted to get fancy, maybe I could do something with rollers, but it's just a cruiser, and it runs great the way it is, so we won't go any further with that. We do have the MSD, which is really a Holley Hyperspark. It's actually what this is a Hyperspark distributor for inline 6, 200, 240, and 170. They all use the same, excuse me, not 240. I apologize, 250. There's a big clarification there. The 240 is a very different platform. But anyways, it's a Hyperspark distributor. It is modified. I had bought this when I had the snipers. I had two different snipers on this, single barrel and two barrel. It is modified to work for the Holley HP ECU that I am running, mainly because the software is looking for a different edge. I covered that edge, a different edge trigger. Covered that in a different video. So if you need, you can always go back and watch any of the details on any of this stuff. I've covered anything that was customizable or needed to be customized. I covered it. So anyways, this is modified inside to re-index the Hall effect shutter that's in there in order to get the right rising or falling edge. I forget which way I had to change it. Trigger. It's just got Champion plugs in it right now. They're fine. MSD, superconductor 8.5s. They do make, there's a company, Glenn Payne over at Mad Racing Parts. Good dude. He makes, and he actually manufactures them, the CTS that's got an 1/8 inch NPT port that'll work for EFI. That's what is in here. So you go over to Mad Racing Parts, you can get that. There if you need it. The 170 heads all had 1/8 inch NPT in them. Sometimes it's a problem when you're putting a sniper on those. The Autolite 1V replacement snipers. So you can source that. Otherwise, they're 3/8 NPT and they don't fit. Over here, we have Holley 19 pound/hour injectors, which are perfect. Those came out at about 80% duty cycle on the dyno, which is right where you want them, at 43 PSI. So that's all worked out the way that it should have. It's a piece of fuel rail, a stock fuel. When I say just a stock, meaning, you know, a generic fuel rail. It was machined for this head, as was the head for the injectors. My machinist did all that work for me. I did have the fuel rail, though. I took it over to a local place here in LA, Ormy Brothers, and had them weld the fittings on the end of that for me. So that came out real nice. It's got an Aeromotive fuel pressure regulator in it. I originally intended to run it at 58 PSI, thinking I would need the extra pressure to get the flow out of the injectors. I do not. They run at 43 PSI. 19 pound/hour is perfect. Ended up working out pretty well. I already talked, I think, in the beginning of this video, I already covered all of this. But, you know, this is an LS throttle body. I actually did find out this is off a big block Chevy 454 in the 90s. They ran these throttle bodies. Holley intake elbow, LS3 map sensor, low car throttle cable, low car brackets, you know, not cheap stuff, but the best stuff. Just a fixed orifice PCV. That's better for EFI. It takes some of the variability out of your idle, because PCVs flutter at idle, and that can change airflow, which makes the IAC erratic, which is what this is, the idle air control motor, which simply just controls the airflow at idle. Let's see, what else do we not cover on here? It says a vintage Inlines head, serial number 11, vintage Inlines manifold. You might notice a little hole down there. That's if you run a carburetor, you can run coolant through it. I don't have that issue, obviously, so it's just open. I actually wish I had a plug for that, but that's just to circulate coolant through there. There's coolant plugs down in there. You can see one of them, maybe both of them. What else we got in here? The wiring harness is totally custom. That was covered in the live stream. John and I did that, and Danny, another buddy of mine, put this all together, loomed it all. It's completely custom, like I said. It's an unterminated harness from Holley. You can see where we popped through the firewall over there, and the ECU lives under the dash here. Now, why the HP ECU and not a Terminator? Because this is the idea behind this car, is that it's endurance. I want it to be able to run and drive every day with zero concerns of reliability. Snipers can get you 5 years down the road or 5 minutes down the road. They are not the most reliable thing on earth. The ECU is made in China. It is mounted inside the throttle body. The ECU in this is the HP ECU specifically are high quality ECUs that are built in Canada. They're metal with they're potted, they're metal casing. They are OEM quality. They are produced by an OEM. So, that's worth its weight to me. So, and there's other stuff that the HP does, which is a Dominator ECU. It's probably more common to hear the Dominator name, but the Dominator ECUs are quite well known, but they do drive-by-wire and some other stuff that the HP doesn't do. Transmission control, HP doesn't do that either. So anyways, that's about the ECU. Large fuel filter on here. It's just a Summit brand, 10 micron fuel filter. The pump is all in the trunk. That's all Aeromotive stuff, in-tank. Phantom in-tank stuff, nice and quiet, good quality. Here is our reservoir for our clutch master cylinder. It's a Malwood clutch master cylinder with a 5/8 bore. I went with a 5/8 bore to get the ratio to be correct for the T5 that is in it. This is an 86 Fox body T5 that's been rebuilt. It's a 335-to-1 first with a .68 overdrive, which I think personally is perfect for this setup. It's a Modern Drivelines adapter plate, Modern Drivelines clutch and flywheel, made specifically for the 6 cylinders. It's a 9-inch setup, not an 8.5-inch setup. So this is a bell housing off a 67 and up. Also covered in another video if you want details on that. For this horsepower and torque, 8.5-inch clutch would have been really pushing it. Honestly, I think the 9-inch is not as strong as I would like it to be. But we'll see. If I drive it normally and keep my foot out of it and don't do bang shifts on this thing, it'll be all right. So that's all good there. Let's see, it's got a hydraulic release bearing in it, which personally I think is the only way to go. People that screw with the Z-bar linkages, it's just a waste of time. Hydraulic's the only way to go. It's a Tilton hydraulic release bearing. I think it's the 3000 series, or I forget what it is. Also in other videos, custom drive shaft that I had made when I put the rear end in it. So if you're doing a T5 conversion with the stock 6-cylinder rear end and you had a C4, you can use the same drive shaft. With a manual, I don't believe that you can. I think that it's got to be shortened. So I did run the stock drive shaft for a little while, and then I took it out when I put the 9-inch in it. Quick performance 9-inch rear end. Why a 9-inch? Because it was easy, and there are lots of parts available for it, and I'll never break it. That's, that was a decision that was made, and quite honestly, they're quite affordable from Quick Performance, and it comes in, comes in pre-assembled parts, and you just put the rear end together. So I took the easy route there. Stock springs in the back, honestly, they're fine for me. Stock replacement Eaton springs in the front. Willwood disc brakes in the front forelug. Willwood disc brakes in the rear. That was a decision made at a later date that I wanted to put the disc brakes in here. Actually, way too much brake for the rear of this car. However, it stops really nice now. So those are kind of the highlight modifications. I didn't mention the rear end is a 389 gear with the 335 to 1 first and an engine that doesn't make a lot of torque at low RPM because it's got a sizable cam and 1.7 rockers in it. It makes plenty of power off the line now because we get torque multiplication. So other than that, the car is totally stock. It's been painted before. We got to get in on that too. It's been painted once or twice. It's been hit here. It's been hit in the rear, but nothing major. It's just got a little bit of Bondo in it. It's not bad. Looking underneath, you can't tell anything. It's got the Hurst shifter in it, which actually is not a Hurst shifter. It is a Hurst shifter ball and one of the few round rod shifters they make. I just thought that would look better in here. It's a Modern Driveline shifter, which actually shifts the handle back like 1.5 inches, which is optimal for these cars in a T5. It's a shifter designed specifically for the T5 in the Mustang. Other than that, the interior, while it's been redone, I did new door cards, new seats, TMI, all TMI stuff. It is totally stock inside. This is how it would have looked from the factory, aside from it was a C4. And I put 3-point seat belts in it in all positions. There's some videos on that, I think, too. Other than that, totally stock. Here in LA, I put a third brake light in it, too, because I almost got rear-ended more than once. People just don't look, and I drive this to work several times a week. So, the AM radio. Stock AM radio, totally stock, didn't need to do any work to it. Some of you know I do vintage electronics as well. However, I didn't need to do anything to it, but what I did do was add an auxiliary input and Bluetooth module under the dash. So it is the original AM radio, but I can actually switch it over to Bluetooth and play my tunes through the original AM radio and original AM speaker. I repaired the speaker. It was cracked from years of time, but I made some repairs to that. So that's all stock, and it still has the AM radio, and the AM radio does work. I replaced the steering wheel. It was cracked with a reproduction, a good reproduction. Gauges are all original except for the voltage gauge, which was obviously a current gauge. Those don't work when you switch to a non-stock alternator, so I had the Rocketman conversions do that and turn it into a voltmeter. But other than that, they're all stock. It does have a solid state instrument CVR, constant voltage regulator, in it. I did that because the before they had solid state electronics, they had these bimetallic strip things with contacts, and they wear out. They go bad, which is exactly what happened to the one that was in here. There's solid state ones available, and you can make a constant voltage regulator if you're handy with electronics. We have our sniper display. It's actually a sniper display from when I had my sniper, but I have flashed it to the Holley EFI software, so which you can do that. That's a good tip. You don't have to get a Holley EFI 3.5-inch screen or a digital dash if you don't want. They have the software. You can simply just flash this up. It's very easy, and it runs the Holley EFI software. This is interesting too. I get asked about this sometimes. This car was a deluxe interior, I think is what it was called. So it had the metal seatbelt buckles and the safety group or whatever Ford, silly thing they called it. I repaired that, and I don't think I put that in a video anywhere, but I put a modern timing relay in that it turns off after like 10 seconds after the key's on. Another one of those bimetallic strip heater contact things that went bad. So I made it work just because it's original to the car. It's got a new heater core in it, new heater box. That was actually replaced right before I got the car. The wheels are Koenig Rewinds. They're one of the few wheels that you can get that actually looks good on this car. That doesn't look like an Asian rice burner. That have the 4x4.5 pattern, or 114.5 I think it is, or 114.4. I can't remember what the metric equivalent is. But anyways, these are the Koenig Rewind, 16 inches with hand cooks on them. The front's a little bit interesting too if you're interested about front suspension. The front suspension is a little bit of a hodgepodge. It's got the Wilwood disc brake conversion on it, and it's got lower roller control arms from Streeter Track. It's got Delrin strut rods on it to make it adjustable, to get caster in the front, so the wheels sit very far forward the way that it is, but that's to get modern radial tires to work correctly on an older car that was meant for bias plies. It's got just stock replacement upper control arms. It's got Eaton springs, which give you the correct 6-cylinder springs. It's got Eaton springs up on top there. It's got a larger, I think this is a 1-inch or 1 1/8 inch sway bar. That made the biggest difference in how it handles. It actually steers into a turn now instead of understeers. That keeps the car nice and stiff. But other than that, it's basically stock. It's just, like I said, the lower roller control arms are so that the strut rods can work. I would like to put the Streeter Track full coilover set in this. It's just really expensive, so that's a someday item. I think that pretty much covers it. It's I've done a lot to it at the same time. It isn't really all that heavily modified. The multi-port injection is probably the most. It's probably the thing that I get asked about the most. That was mainly for efficiency's sake and for idle's sake. It does run very well like this. It's very reliable like that. The multi-port is going to be more reliable than throttle body injection always. A Wilwood master cylinder. It's a 1-inch, by the way, for the four-wheel disc brakes. 1 inch just gives me the volume that I need. It's got a Wilwood adjustable proportional valve on it now. I've gone through a few iterations there. So anyways, that's just covering, that's covering the basics. I can't give you all the part numbers. I know people ask for that. I had done, I'm sure, hundreds and hundreds of hours of research to figure this all out and to figure out how I was going to do this, how I was going to make it all fit, what sensors were going to work, figuring out there's calls to Holley about, can I use the Hyperspark distributor to get full sequential multiport, which it actually does do. That is how it works. You can't do coil on plug yet. Holley hasn't enabled the software to do that, which is kind of annoying. Otherwise, I probably would have done that. But now it runs so well, I'm not going to screw with it. But coil on plug would have been a nice improvement. So there's a lot of research that goes into doing this. So when people say, what, give me a list of parts so I know what to do. Some of it is custom made stuff. Particularly the EFI stuff. I had to make some custom stuff for the throttle linkage, obviously. I'm using parts that weren't meant to be used the way that they are to get the, throttle linkage to work or to get the EFI to work. Getting the angles correct for the injectors or getting them as optimum as I could. That was a lot of math and discussion with the machinist. So anyways, there's an adapter plate here for the LS throttle body to go from what would normally be a 92 millimeter to a 75 millimeter. Some of the stuff they don't make anymore. This throttle body is not in production anymore. This plate, I think Holley stopped making this adapter plate, which adapts a 75 to a 92, what would be normally a 4-bolt. They actually call it a 3-bolt to a 4-bolt, I think is what they call it. I think Holley may still have some of those in stock, but I don't think they make them anymore. So there's a lot of work that goes into this. It's not as easy as just bolt and go. That's the thing with the 6-cylinder. So anyways, just wanted to go through it kind of soup to nut and give you an idea of what's in here. It's kind of long drawn out video, but that's okay. Somebody might find it useful someday. I don't do these videos for me. I don't do it because it makes me money, because it certainly doesn't. This is all about documenting stuff that nobody else has really documented before. So if there's anything else that you're wondering about on here, shoot me a comment, and I try to answer comments. I get a lot of the, hey, can you help me with such and such and such? Some of these things that get asked about could have such broad answers and troubleshooting steps. I don't have time to do that. But if there's if you say, hey, what bolt did you use there, or what wire, or what, where'd you get that thing? Just tell me, just ask me, and I've kept a pretty good log of all the parts that are in this. So, if you need to know what it was I used, happy to give you the part number or the link. So, anyways, we'll wrap this up. That's just the coverage of the whole thing as best as I could.